Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Ryan, a member of the CK12 team, and my colleague Katie and I will be running today's webinar on Groups and Practice 101. We're so glad that you've joined us today. Before I introduce you to CK12, I'd like to do a quick reminder about the Zoom webinar platform. Right now, you should see two different options on your Zoom screen, one for Q&A and one for chat. During today's presentation, whenever you have a question about CK12, please post it in the Q&A window. The chat window is a place for community conversation. We'd love for you all to introduce yourselves. If you're an educator, feel free to share where you live and the subjects you teach. Just make sure in the chat window that you are sending any general posts to all panelists and attendees, and not just to CK12 or the panelists. Also, while we don't anticipate any technical issues during our broadcast, if you have any trouble with your video or your sound, please let us know in Q&A or the chat window. Right now, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague Katie to get you started with today's core content.
Thanks, Ryan, and thank you to everyone who joined us today for our session on groups and practice. In this webinar, we'll be covering the following topics. CK12's adaptive practice system. So our intelligence system has 150,000 plus questions, and it adapts to students by challenging them with harder questions or recommending resources. Then we'll go into CK12 Class Groups, where you can create and manage groups, and the features that are included in them, such as sharing content, hosting discussions, making assignments, and seeing student progress. And finally, we'll talk about those assignments and student progress, including assigning practice and other modalities, and seeing kind of the detailed reports that go with student work and the time that they spend through CK12 classes. So our main goal is that by the end of this session, you understand how our adaptive practice system works, you can assign practice and other modalities to your classes, and you can monitor student progress.
But before we get into the core content of the webinar, it would be great if we found out a little bit more about you. You'll see a poll here in a few seconds that will ask you about your current knowledge of CK12's adaptive practice. So please go ahead and we'll take about a minute here, just pause, and you can answer this question. This question will help us to understand how familiar you are with CK12's adaptive practice tool. This will allow us to go into the correct depth about this tool during this webinar. So please go ahead and answer this question now. Just a few more seconds to finish up. And let's take a look at those results. So it looks like the majority of us are new to using CK12's adaptive practice. Some of us have used it, and there's actually someone in the group who's used it frequently. So maybe they can share some great ideas in the chat for everyone. But this is a great point for today's webinar, which is really introducing people to how to use our adaptive practice.
Thanks, Ryan, for sharing those. That'll be helpful as we talk about the different parts of this webinar. So I just want to kind of talk about what you'll be able to do at the end of this particular webinar. So that includes finding appropriate practice for various concepts, assigning practice, reads, interactives, and other modalities, creating a new class group or making changes to an existing one, finding detailed per question feedback on students, and then quickly getting a feel for the number of students that have completed an assignment or not. Now, for those of you who choose to take our customizing practice session in May or over the summer, these are some of the things we're going to cover in that session. So that includes customizing practice into quizzes, settings for these quizzes, which is really just customized practice, adding concepts to a quiz, selecting and reordering questions, creating new questions, using our math editor, and then creating multi-concept assignments, as well as the reports for both these multi-concept assignments and your adapted quizzes. So if you're wanting additional help with any of these particular skills right now, or with things like CK12 integration with learning management systems, including Google Classroom, Canvas, Schoology, and Edmodo, please be aware that this particular session is Groups in Practice 101, and it focuses on the basics. So we'll prioritize questions related to the basics during the webinar, but don't worry, we stay on as always to address any complex customizing questions or learning management questions that need a live demonstration at the end of our presentation.
Great. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move into our first topic, which is going to be on adaptive practice. So what is adaptive practice? Adaptive practice is a digital assessment tool that adapts to student input. CK12's adaptive practice system is a digital tool designed to meet students at their current level of understanding and help them master the next step for any concept. Because of that, our system will bump students up to available harder questions if they are successfully answering, or will make recommendations such as text to read, a video to watch, or an interactive to work with if students find the current level too challenging. Why should I use it? CK12 has over 150,000 questions with a variety of question types. Plus, when students submit their work, you, as the teacher, can see info such as the time they spent, their streak, and the level of questions. Note that because our adaptive practice system meets students where they are, a student who is struggling may hit the goal of 10 correct with all easy questions, and a student who is more advanced would have more of a mix of levels. For teachers, this ensures that each student is progressively and appropriately challenged while maintaining a clear record of each student's level of understanding. And where do I find it? On the CK12 website, through concepts, or the adaptive practice icon. There's also a free CK12 app available for all smartphones and tablets. This tool provides the ability for students to practice at their own pace or on any electronic device, whether in school, at home, on the bus, or even on the way to the game.
Thanks, Ryan. So I think with that, let me share my screen and we're going to go live and see what this looks like on CK12. So let's see if you can see that screen. So as always, I can just click on that CK12 icon in the top left. That will take me to the home page. So this might be what you guys are familiar with seeing when you access CK12. We're actually asking for feedback right now. So if you are interested in giving feedback, feel free to click that. But kind of this is the starting place for where you could find practice. So this first part of the webinar has to do with our practice tool and what adaptive practice looks like. And so that first piece is, okay, well, where can I find it? So either by searching or kind of going into a particular subject. So right now, this is the subjects I've chosen. I can show all subjects. So that might be what you guys are used to seeing when you access our homepage. And then if I pick a particular concept, so let's pick elementary school and maybe grade 4, multiplication and division, and then factors and multiples. So here, I can go into any one of these particular concepts and it will take me into that concept page. And here you'll see an interactive, a video that goes with this, and then this practice tool. And if I click on that practice tool as a teacher, I have a bunch of options. So I could preview this option and see what that practice looked like as just kind of the same way my students would see it. They would just see practice instead of preview here. I can customize this practice as we've talked about, kind of different ways to do that. I can assign it to my class, and we'll talk about that later on in this particular webinar when we talk about assignments. And I can even download a PDF, which generates kind of a worksheet for this particular practice session. So one option to find that practice is to go through a particular concept. This just takes me back to that concept page, and then I choose the practice kind of card and access practice that way. If I started at the beginning again, I could browse all of our practice by scrolling down and clicking on this adaptive practice little circle there. And students have the same options to access practice. They could search for it, or they could go through that browse option or through this adaptive practice piece. And then if I go into here, let's pick a different topic. So maybe physics this time and motion in 2 dimensions. And what you'll see on the right here is that as a teacher, I've previewed some of this. So I'm actually have a score on how I've done so far on that particular piece. And students will see that same percentage. It'll show them kind of, oh, you've gotten, 3 out of 10 right here, 7 out of 10 right here, and kind of worked your way through different parts. So that progress, both for students as well as any account that you're working with, will be shown on the right. So now if I wanted to start a brand new topic, I could click on projectile motion problem solving. And when it takes you to this page, it gives you some suggestions on things you can do to prepare before you practice. So this is a physics concept. So in addition to kind of the text and a video, this is an interactive simulation. We have another video here. So I could explore any of these particular concepts or even see all of the modalities attached to this particular topic that would help me prepare if I don't know anything about this topic. I can start practicing, and that's what a student would see as well. And then as a teacher, in addition to the download option, I also get, once again, the ability to assign it to a class or to customize this practice. Now, let's kind of close this for a second and look at one that I started already. So if I go into projectile motion, you'll see now it says additional ways to learn because it's still encouraging you to check out some of those other modalities. Here's another simulation, and then kind of the basic information that I have here for what I've been working on. And I can click keep practicing if I want to go in and see what that practice actually looks like. So our adaptive practice system is set up with a goal of 10 correct. So that means, as Ryan said, that different students will get different questions based on how they're doing. But it really treats that as the goal of saying, okay, we want you to get 10 right as a practice piece, and really give you a chance to explore and work from there. So if I start practicing, now notice I've already gotten a couple correct in there, so I already have a score going here. I can get a hint if I'm not sure about this particular topic. So in this case, it says the shape for mathematics is a shape of quadratic equations. That might be helpful. We have a scratch pad, which, especially if you're doing math, might be helpful. So I could say 1 + 1. I actually was in a school a few weeks ago, and they were projecting practice onto their smartboard and having students actually use the scratch pad as a group exercise with group practice at the board, which I thought was a really cool use case for using that scratch pad in a really great way. It's especially helpful for something like that or on a tablet where a student just wants to kind of write from there. But I can make that go away. I could give some feedback if I thought there was a way to improve this question, either now or after I saw the answer. And then I could type in the answer. So let's say a parabola, got that one correct. I can continue on. Now, if I just start randomly guessing in here, instead of kind of bumping me to harder questions, and you'll see this little meter is starting to flash. It's saying, hey, you're not getting that many right. Maybe we want to look at some options. And then soon enough, it's no longer giving me the option to proceed. And it actually recommends that I go back and I read something, or I check out an interactive, or I watch a video. So just kind of encourages students that are struggling to actually take the time to learn a bit more before they continue to randomly guess. So I could work my way through here. It looks like maximum height attained and the angle. And at any point in time, I can stop that. So I could just pause my practice, and it will record my updated score, and it'll give me some information as well. So I could work my way through. I can now see my progress as a student. So I'm going to talk more about this score sheet, because this progress that I'm seeing as, in this case, whatever user is using it, is the same thing you'll see as a teacher in the assignments and reports feature. And then kind of the last just couple of pieces I want to go through when we're talking about resources for adaptive practice. You can go to ck12.org/practice, and that gives you just a quick overview of what this looks like. So adaptive practice is there. It reminds you that the goal is to get 10 correct. It will adjust. So some kids will get those easy questions if they're struggling and kind of getting those pop-up recommendations. Kids who are doing really well will get bumped to the harder questions so that they're not just stuck on the easy ones that they can quickly solve. And that will challenge them at the level that they're at. So hopefully that addresses some of the personalized learning components you might be looking for and other pieces as you're working your way through. And then those recommendations that we talked about, and those recommendations cover a variety of what we call modalities. So that could be a read, a video, an interactive, kind of maybe a study sheet, all of these other different pieces that fit within there. And then just some helpful information if you have other questions, or you could jump straight to practice from that ck12.org/practice. So that just might be a useful page. If I scrolled all the way down, the other super useful thing for practice is our tools and apps page. So this is something that we continue to come back to repeatedly. These ones right here, we have our Flexbook app and our physics app. Those are specifically helpful for offline access. Our practice app does require that you have access to Wi-Fi of some sort or data plan, in that because it's adaptive and students as they answer questions still need to be able to access updated information. But that is super helpful. You can do practice on a phone, on a tablet, and it doesn't matter. We're device agnostic, so feel free to use it on anything, Chromebooks, etc. So I think with that, hopefully it gives you a good idea of what our adaptive practice tool looks like and what it does. And then I'm going to pause here for a few minutes. We'll take any questions about the practice tool. Clicking that little assign button, we'll talk about more as we continue on to assignments, but feel free to ask questions at this point in time, and then we'll go on to more details as we go.
Thanks, Katie. I think that gives us a really good overview on how to find practice and also just what the basics of practice looks like. So hopefully if you guys have any questions on these topics, please feel free to just write them in the Q&A window now, and we'd be happy to demonstrate them for you.
So maybe we'll just kind of give you a few minutes to think about that, to type some of those in. If you have questions, it looks like one's in the chat window. We encourage you to put them in Q&A so we can make sure that we check them off as we go through. But there's a question on a way to section off groups of assignments. So the short version of that is that you could create multiple types of assignments, but there's not and then you can sort within there. And I'm going to go through kind of what that assignment looks like within our platform in a later part of this section. So I'm going to kind of hold off on that specific question for a second. But there's a couple of different options. You can, if you go to your library and you're trying to kind of put pieces in here. So if I go into my library, I can see different resources that I put, and we do have filtering and folder systems there. So if you wanted to organize all of your resources, you could definitely do that by filtering and folder options within the library as a whole. And that's kind of covered a bit more in our Flexbook sections and webinars, because that's often where you start using that library for customized content a lot more. But yeah, so I think if we don't have any questions at this point in time, oh, it looks like we got one, or that one was answered. But feel free to, as I continue on, as Ryan continues on talking, to add more questions to our Q&A. We'll either try to incorporate them as we go or continue to take breaks to answer some of those questions throughout the course of this webinar.
So if there are no any questions at this time, then I'm going to go ahead and I will take the screen back from you, Katie. And we will go ahead and move into our next topic. So again, please feel free to keep those questions coming though. We're happy to stop for questions in a little bit again. But for now, we're going to go on to our next topic, which is on CK12's groups. So CK12 Class Groups, what is it? So CK12 Class Groups, soon to be called just classes, enable educators to share resources, host group discussions, make assignments, and even see student reports. Why should I use it? Students can learn from each other, teachers can track progress and see assignments, and they could even share resources, and it allows for easy access for student learning. And where do I get it? You can create and access CK12 classes through your dashboard or the icon at the top of any CK12 page. So
that was short and sweet, a quick overview. And with that, I'm going to switch back and steal the screen again from Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. And we're going to show you what that looks like on our particular site. So there are two ways to access our classes on CK12. One is if you're on your dashboard, which is often where you'll end up once you log in. And here you'll see recently viewed content and different pieces there. And then this option to click on groups. And if you notice that by clicking on groups there, you also could access that by just clicking on the groups icon at the top. And that would take you to this part. And this shows you your different options for here. There, you might see a tutorial when you log in, or you could click on this tutorial if you don't remember how it works. And that will pop up some options, your demo class and different pieces like that. So feel free to reference that if needed. And then if you want to add a new group, then you would just click this nice little plus sign. So I could join a group. Let's say I have someone else that created a group where you gave students a code. They could join a group that way. But what we want to do today is create a group. So I'm going to put my group name. It says my new class. So demo for April 4th, just so I know which one I'm working on. And right now you'll see both the option for a class and a study group. Very shortly, you would be seeing this instead. You'll just see your single option for your classes. We're actually phasing out study groups. For the most part, classes are what you'd want to use anyway so that you could assign work and see that progress. So just a heads up, if you're creating new groups right now, I recommend creating classes because those are what we're leaning towards. And then all of this content will start saying classes instead of groups across our site. So I could put a description, demo for webinar if I wanted to. I could pick subjects if I wanted to associate it to a particular subject, and I could choose a theme if I wanted to do so here. And then I'm going to click Create Group. So that's the simple way to create a brand new group. Once you're in here, let's open this particular group and see what it looks like. So this class is empty. I can add students to it. So I can invite students by email. I can find existing students. If students don't have an email, this is particularly helpful for elementary students who often don't have a specific email assigned, or I could work to upload a class roster. So you have different options for adding students to your group. And that's kind of the piece to start with. So the first thing you want to do is have people within there. You could talk about, you see kind of all these different options within here. And what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go to a different group just so you can see what it might look like if it had some more resources within there. So if I go back to my groups here, and I could go down to, let's say, this one, and you'll see that now I have some different things happening as we work our way through. So I'm going to hold off on assignments and reports because we're going to talk about that in the next section, but I definitely want to talk about different resources. So Q&A. So I could start a discussion here. I could ask a question. I could say, what do you think about, let's see, we were doing projectile motion, and ask that question. I could post it, and then my students could answer that. So you could create some class discussion within a particular group there. You can add shared resources. So right here, it looks like I've shared an Earth Science Concepts for High School book. If I go anywhere else on CK12, so let's say, let me just open up another tab, CK12, kind of on most of your resources, you'll see an option. So I could go to a textbook, I could share a textbook, or I could go into a particular concept, and I could pick any of these different options. So let's say this video here, you'll see this option to share to groups. So I can click on that and I can add it to my different options here. We have a bunch of different ones. Integrated grades is the one I'm working with, so let me share it to there. And throughout our site, I can share resources to that group. It's especially helpful to share kind of a whole book if you're working with that. And if I just reload this page, so let's go to out of that for a second and then back into shared resources. And you'll see now I have a video here and I have a Flexbook. So I can sort by type, or I could sort by members. So let's say if multiple people kind of share different things, that's not as relevant anymore because as a teacher, you're the one sharing to a group so that your students can't kind of inundate your class with a number of resources. But I can definitely kind of see these different pieces. It's particularly helpful, as I said, to share a textbook if you're working off of a book. That way your students can easily access it within their class group. A couple of other options here. So you can see the members. You can see we have a couple students in here. So I'm the leader. Ryan, who's co-presenting with me today, has a teacher account as well. And then I have 2 students listed within here. And I can add extra students there and have the same options. The last piece is your settings option. So if I go in here, you'll see, once again, the option to see the students, add students. And this group code is what they would use at that main page if they had a join option. But it's actually easier if students are already in logged into CK12 just to share this group code with the access link. And then if they click on that, they're automatically added to the group. They don't have to kind of go through any of those pieces. And then the last options, these are your email notifications. So you could turn these on if you wanted to get an email notification as new members join, or if people posted on Q&A. And then you actually have the option as the teacher to allow for anonymous posting. So let's say you created a question where you wanted to see how students were doing and you wanted them to not worry about kind of what their answer was. You could turn that on. In general, you'd probably want to leave it off to see who's posting accordingly. And then if you don't want them to use the Q&A feature, you can actually disable Q&A. And then I could turn it back on again later. But so if I turn this off right now, we can't access that. If I turn it back on, I can now go back in. So you can kind of limit discussions if you don't want students using that feature at this time. So that gives you a number of different options within your particular group. And then the assignments and reports, as we've said, are right here as well. And that's kind of probably the bulk of what we'll be going through during this webinar, and that will be the next part. But I want to just give you, now that you've seen what this group looks like, the last piece I want to kind of talk about before we stop for questions, but feel free to start putting those in that Q&A piece, is that if I look at my dashboard and I go to groups, so whether I do it from the dashboard and click on groups or I go straight to groups, I can see some general information about those groups. I can say, okay, I just want the ones that I lead, and this class of study groups will go away. So let's say I just want to see my classes. And this tells me how many people I have in them, the assignments that have been made, different pieces that I've shared. So I just shared that extra resource. So now it says 2, there's 1 Q&A question. And I can even look quickly through those assignments and get an overview of kind of what students have completed it or not completed it as I work my way through. And I can see that for all of my grades. Now, as we said, the demo we just made doesn't have students in it. So the first thing it's going to prompt you to do is add students to incorporate that piece. And then this is another one that has more members and assignments completed. So you can see that overview both on kind of that main groups page, or if I click into any particular topic and I go into that, then I can start navigating within the CK12 group. So I think with that, let's check in and see if you guys have any questions as we're working our way through.
All right, thanks, Katie. It looks like you're doing such a good job with the classes that everyone feels pretty good about it. But if you do have any specific questions, please feel free to go ahead and ask them now, and remember to post them to the Q&A window. All right, well, at this time, if we don't have any questions, I think it would be a great time to go ahead and maybe mix it up and take a look at a video. So we're gonna go ahead and show you a spotlight of one of a very active CK12 teacher, Jessica Favilla Casillas, who was a chemistry teacher at Austin High School in El Paso, Texas. We actually had an amazing opportunity to go ahead and visit her in her classroom and see the way that she used different CK12 tools with her students who access CK12 on laptops, tablets, and even mobile phones. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll take a look at this video.
I like to use CK12 groups to assign resources. It's completely accessible and versatile. And the fact that I can edit the textbook makes it a little more personal. So my students see that, oh, well, you know, Ms. Favilla Casillas went ahead and edited it for us. Therefore, I should read it. I better read it. I've shared a resource. You have 2 shared resources here, okay? You're going to get the one that says types of reactions. Later on, you guys are going to answer a Q&A. And by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to figure out what kind of reaction it is just by looking at it. I found that a lot of students relied on their phones, and sometimes I have, like right now, I have kids who were absent the day before, and I needed it to be easy for them to just go to whatever it is that I'm asking. So what I did was I created a poster with a QR code they could easily scan, and they had the codes that were particular to their group number, which was their period number. I divided them by class. I thought that was easier and way more efficient. I didn't have to waste time creating a login, and that group number just takes them straight to what they need. In all, it's a very positive movement, the fact that anybody can use these textbooks anywhere, really. If I tell them to read it before class, they will go and read it before class. There is no excuse for them not being able to learn. There's no excuse for them not being able to acquire any kind of information.
All right. So with that being said, let's go ahead and move into the next aspect of our webinar, which is going to be looking at assignments and reports. We mentioned briefly how to quick assign practice or other modalities to any CK12 class, but now we're actually going to look at, for the class feature, to learn more about assignments with multiple concepts and the reports that you can see on CK12 student progress pages. So what is our assignments and reports? You can use the CK12 Groups tool to create single or even multi-concept assignments and review student progress. Assignments are just that, something you want your students to complete. Reports allow you to see their progress on any assignment. Note that you won't see progress on unassigned concepts so that your report isn't cluttered with other subject areas or random sections that they may have tried at any point. Why should I use it? Creating assignments allows you to see how students are progressing. Assignments for other modalities are simply whether they access text or a video or got to play around in a sim, sandbox, or answer a question for a Plix. For practice, assignments are either general goals of 10 right questions based on student competency or specific questions requirements if you customized it into your own quiz. And where do I get it? Major modalities can be quick assigned to classes from any page. Assignments for practice can also be created from within class groups. All reports are accessed through your corresponding class group on CK12.
Thanks, Ryan. With that, we're gonna switch over and see what this looks like on CK12. So we've mentioned that kind of assigned to class feature on a video or on practice and the text, but let's talk about what that might look like on some other options. So let's say I wanted to go into a simulation and we have kind of our physics sims and we're starting to roll out some chemistry sims that are in beta. But if I click into any simulation, my assigned to class feature, because there's none of that left nav option, is actually at the top here. And when I click assign to class, I can add instructions. So I could say, I want this to be, please play around with this sim, whatever I want to go. And then you're going to need to pick your platform. So because we're working with CK12 class groups, we would be clicking CK12, and then it's going to show me my different classes here. So the one that we've been working on is that integrated grades one. So I could assign that to that class, and I could set a due date if I wanted to. So let's say I want you to complete this by Friday, and I could set different due dates for different students, for different classes within CK12. And I could check off more than one. So I could maybe make this one due on Monday. Let's say I wasn't gonna have class on Friday for an assembly or something. So I can assign that to my classes. Quick and simple. When we go back to those class groups in a minute, you'll see those assignments show up as well. If I wanted to access it kind of in a Plix, which is our play, learn, interact, and explore object. So let me go back here. You can click on CK12 to get back to here. So my interactives, these Plix right here, if you were exploring those, it would be in the same place, that upper right option. And then kind of if I explored, let's pick a topic outside of math and science, because we do have some other resources for that, usually text options. And I could go in. Now notice I don't have the assign to class option at the level of the whole book, because you could share a whole book with your class, but you shouldn't really be taking an assignment for one shot for the entire book. So I'd actually want to kind of pick a particular topic. Let's say I'm going to pick chapter 9 and go into that actual section. And here, if you don't see the assign to class written out as the word in bright orange, you could just hover over these and notice this first little clipboard is your assign to class option. I can also share to groups right here, because we've talked about that as well. I can add it to my library or add it to a textbook because it's a particular read, and even customize this and make a copy. So I'm going to start by clicking Assign to Class, and the same option pops up again. And I can choose CK12, and we're starting to get some questions about learning management systems in there, and I'll cover those in more detail. But if I was going to assign it to Google Classroom, I could just click that Google Classroom, connect it to my Google Class, and then these are the different classes I have in Google Classroom. And it would work the same way as if I was assigning it within CK12. Now, the one thing you want to be careful of is that if you're using Google Classroom and you want to see their reports within Google Classroom, that you assign it to Google Classroom. If you want to see the reports within CK12, you're going to want to assign it within CK12. So that's part of the reason why I wanted to kind of mention that here, that wherever you want to see student reports is the platform in which you should assign that content. So for today, we're working with reports in CK12. So I would assign it to CK12 if that's what I wanted to do from there. Now let's talk about at what point a student might be able to turn in, practice, or submit that particular content. So I'm actually going to share a different screen. I'm going to actually jump over to a student screen for a second. So let me know if you can see the student one. Let me try that one more time because I don't think you... Okay, so I think you're seeing this now. So our Start Practicing option. So if this is a student account, notice they don't have that Assign to Class or Customize option. They can click Start Practicing. And let's say it depends on this one. I just did this practice, so hopefully I can get some of these. If we go from here, I might get one wrong there. I might, parabola, I believe was the answer as we did this. And they can stop because it's practice, it's gonna save their state. They can stop for now. If they finish the 10 correct, it will kind of congratulate them for finishing 10 correct. But I can keep practicing, or I can go to the next concept here. If this was assigned to them, so let's say projectile motion must not be an assignment at this point in time, they would have an option to turn it in right there. So actually, let's go to our class, pull up an assignment. So if I'm a student, I could go to groups the same way I could as a teacher. I could pull up a particular assignment and see what that looked like. So my assignments are right here. I have some practice options. Let's say I go to one that we're working up, kind of upcoming assignments, addition and subtraction. If I go into a particular topic, I can keep practicing. Because I'm not past the due date, I have the option to turn it in again. So if I wanted to practice a little bit, I could 6 minus 8 is -2. Now I have 8 out of 10. Maybe that's enough for me, so I could stop, or maybe I ran out of time and I can turn it in again. And that will update my score as long as I'm not past the due date on there. So as a student, anytime they kind of make progression within there, they could turn in that practice, but they definitely need to click this turn in button in order for that to show up in your teacher reports. If I went back to here and I said, okay, well, we just assigned going fishing, so I want to start this particular thing, it will open up that simulation for me. And notice I can't turn this in yet. I have to interact with the simulation before I'm allowed to turn it in. So I need to start kind of saying, okay, well, I could skip this particular piece, and then I'm going to start playing around with this part. And once I start kind of playing around with different pieces, you'll see this turn in option. So they actually have to do something within that particular part in order for them to be able to turn it in. For Plix Interactives, they have to start answering questions before they see the turn in button. So if they aren't seeing that yet, it's either because it wasn't assigned to them, or because they haven't gotten far enough in doing that particular piece in order for it to show up and be an option to turn it in. So let's say I'm going to turn this in. There are other questions that they can answer as well in the physics ones. In chemistry, we're still in beta and developing those. But yeah, so I could turn this particular piece in, and it goes from there. Now, just to kind of go through the different types of modalities, that was a simulation. Our practice, you saw that piece. Our videos and text modalities, once they access it, they have the ability to turn those in. So that's something that you want to be aware of. And then this past due, if they've never submitted it, they can turn it in at this point in time. So let's say I open this up. This is a read. I'm going to now access this and turn it in. And we'll see what that looks like kind of from the reports piece. So just know that those are the different places and options based on the type of modality and also what they have to do with it as they go through from there. So with that, I'm going to switch back over to the teacher dashboard so we can explore kind of what those reports look like as well. So I'm back in my teacher page. I'm going to go back to my groups, and I'm going to look at that integrated assignment option. So as always, we can navigate through here through our different options. So our first one is assignments. So you'll see a couple of different options. So you'll see first ones that have been assigned. So I've added going fishing. I added a due date for this particular one. When I quick assigned it, you might even see ones that you've assigned to other classes. So the goal of this is that if you've created an assignment for one class, it shows up as an option to assign in another class. So that way you could see and quickly assign that. If you say, oh, I forgot to assign it to this class, you could find it as a potential assignment within your assignment options. Now, a couple of things you could change here. So I could edit the due date on this particular piece because this is a plick, so there's not really much else to change. I could undo that assignment, and then I could delete the assignment as a whole, or I could see the reports for that particular assignment. As a note, editing is something that if you change it, not really an option for here, but let's find one that's actually a practice option. So here, if I actually edited this and I customize that content, it would change that particular assignment as a customized content for everywhere it's assigned. So just be aware that if you customize and you start editing, customizing pieces and you've assigned it, you're making those changes, but it warned you, so no worries there. So you could change the due date. That's the simple one. You could see the reports from there. And then you can add more assignments from here. You can also create an assignment from here. I usually think it's easiest if you're just assigning previously created content to do it straight from that quick assign piece. Creating an assignment would be something that you could do if you wanted to combine multiple types of practice into one assignment. And that, as I said, we'll cover in more depth in our customizing practice workshop. So definitely stick around for that or ask questions at the end. Now, all of this content that you're working on from here shows up in reports once students have done stuff. So what this shows you is people that have done the work that's been assigned to them or not. And I can click on any particular one of these. So going fishing, that was a simulation. I just assigned it. So the only person that did it was the student account that was showing up there. And for anything that's a read modality or an interactive or a video or something like that, they're going to get a complete or incomplete. So within CK12, that counts as just a check mark. Within some other systems, that would count as full or no credit for whatever you assigned that particular amount to be for that assignment. I can then go back. For practice, these are the percentages that they've gotten correct out of that goal of 10 correct. So in our system, that assignment is worth 100%. For every one they get correct, they get 10 correct. If you set that to be some other score, it would be the percentage with the goal of 10 correct. And then I could continue exploring and say, okay, well, mineral groups was some type of just general modality to explore. Let's see, here's another practice option. Oh, that's a Plix. So that has that piece there. This one is an example of kind of one of those multi-concept assignments that we'll cover in more depth in customizing practice. But this gives you, for this particular concept, this person got all 10 correct. This one just got 8 out of 10, that last one that we just added there, and then the 100% there. So you can see this progress based on the particular pieces. If you wanted to go in depth into any option, you could click on that score percent right there. And it's telling you who the student is, and then it gives you the same score that the student got when they finished that particular practice. So here you'll see the practice goal, you'll see the number they got correct, their best streak, so this person managed to get them all right in a row right there. They got 40 seconds it took them, and their skill level was 100. If I went back, I could see the student as a whole, and I could see all of their options here on all the work that they worked on. And let's say I wanted to switch over, and this is actually new. So we had a request recently to easily jump between students. So I could go from here and I could click on a different student right here. And now it's showing me those particular options as we work our way through. So let me look at the integer addition one, because this person got, some wrong in there. So let's see what might have happened. They got 8 correct. 2 is their best streak. It took them a little longer to work on it. And you'll see kind of different pieces. In this case, they were struggling, so they were given easy questions. And you actually can go into the level of the questions themselves. So you can see the work that they've done. They got this one wrong. That was the correct answer, kind of as they go through. So I find a couple pieces of this particularly helpful. I find the questions themselves, as a teacher, a student who spent just a minute or two and was struggling a lot, I might encourage them to take more time to read those questions, talk to them about what that means, their skill level, did you use that extra popped up practice, kind of all of those different pieces as you work your way through. So hopefully this level of detail, if you want to drill down to it, is useful for you when you're working with a particular student. And then if I go back to reports, a couple of notes just on reports. They used to be organized just with the student's first name. They now include last name and they're alphabetical by last name. So just know that if you're looking for it, hopefully that matches your assignment book a little bit more. And students are here and the assignments work this way, and you can just kind of click through to them and then use the 3 dots to get back to the large particular piece. So those are the specifics. As a note, we said kind of if you're doing practice, the goal is 10 correct. So you're seeing that 10%. If you customize your practice, and let's say you made 25 questions, then the percentage would be however many they got correct out of that full set of 25. So that's kind of where the adjustment is made, in that our goal is 10 correct for our general adaptive practice, and you can set your own goals if you customize it as you work your way through. So I think those are the main parts. Once again, as I said before, if I click on dashboard or I click on groups, I can easily see kind of that complete or incomplete part. So let me go over here and you'll see, okay, well, we were just looking at life cycle. That one's not assigned yet. Here's an integer addition and subtraction. So that one student that was working on it has done those parts. The other person hasn't done, and I can navigate this way as well. So you'll see a lot of different options as you go through from there. But I think that kind of gives you the quick overview on our side of reports and practice and assignments, and kind of looking through from there.
Great. So with that being said, we'll take a break from Katie's presentation, and we'll see if there's any questions that you have. So it did look like we have a question. It was asking about if we know any international schools, and particularly with an interest in China, that are using CK12. That's a great question. CK12 is used worldwide. We are actually always looking to expand the different countries that are using CK12. A great place to look where Katie's going to show us. First, she's going to look at the usage map. And so if you look at the map, we can see users all over the world. We are actually just started a partnership with some schools in Taiwan, and we are translating all of our simulations into traditional Chinese. We've also done projects with people in Germany. Currently, we're working a lot with schools in Brazil to translate content into Portuguese. We have a lot of content in Spanish as well. Another really cool feature maybe Katie can show us is if we go to any content, we have a Google Translate functionality built into the page. And so if you want to use CK12 in a particular native language for your students, you can go ahead and go to the bottom of any page, and you could actually use that Google Translate functionality to work on translating the page into a language that would be more useful for your students. So this is a great way to get started on CK12 in different language. A lot of our content is customizable as well. So we've had schools come in and actually customize that content using that starting point from Google Classroom and fully customizing that content into their language for their students. So we just had another question about translating Flexbooks into another language like Spanish. So we actually do have some Flexbooks that are already translated into Spanish. So we can show you how to access those. But yes, you could customize any resource. And when you customize that resource, you have the ability to translate it into Spanish or any other language. So Katie, do you want to tell us about finding the Spanish books?
Yeah, sure. So our most of our math concept collections, as well as some of our science ones, have already been translated through a partnership with Intel. So if you look here, when you land on any particular what we call branch or subject area, you can click on that Flexbook textbook tab. And then you can sort by languages, so you can pick the Spanish books from there. Or if you're in all languages, you can just scroll to the bottom, and you'll see that our concept books have been translated. So just to give you an idea, for example, there's a middle school math concept grade 7 and a middle school math grade 7 book. The middle school math was our original book, and it's more of a traditional book with multiple skills within any lesson. And we took that and we broke it down into concepts. And these are the ones that have practice that correlates one-to-one with the sections. And we kind of tag our whole system based on these, what we call concepts, which is really just a skill within a larger lesson. And so those newer concept books are what you'll see translated at the bottom in Spanish. So definitely check those out if that's something that would be useful for you. And you can find those if I went back to math and I picked a different topic, let's say geometry, I could click on Flexbook textbooks and scroll down as well, and you'll see the Spanish version there. And I know that we have done some work with our science. So let's see if life science has those in there. And you'll see kind of that life science book translated as well. So some options to work with. If you use the Google Translate option, it's not a perfect translation, but that might be a great place to start if you are looking for other options there as well.
Great. So we'll wait for maybe a couple more questions here. And then at that point, we'll move back to our presentation, and we'll work through some kind of announcements and updates about CK12 before we conclude our webinar.
So I know we had a couple questions about learning management systems that were coming in here. Feel free to keep adding questions while you guys add those in for a minute. I'll answer some of the ones from here. So for Schoology and Canvas in particular, the first thing you would actually need to do, let me click back to CK12, is you would need to go to our tools and apps. And then for those learning management systems, you'll see a link that takes you to a form. And so whoever your IT person is for that school, kind of going through, you'll get one key to connect the two programs. And then once it's connected within here, you'll see options. So if I go to a course and I want to add a material, once that app is attached into Schoology, I can then add materials and I can browse CK12 content from here. So I could go through and pick a topic. In Schoology, I can assign a bunch of different options. So let's see what we have here. You'll see a read and practice for this topic. If I go back to, let's say, physics, which has our simulations as well. You'll see, okay, here's a read and interactive. Physics of archery, real world application. If there was a simulation, it would be attached there as well. So I could assign those different pieces. I can share it. If I go into it, I could kind of work my way through those parts. And that would open it up. And then a student would see that content within the app itself. So they could choose those different pieces to assign and create assignments accordingly. If you have customized content, you can, instead of exploring our general content, you could go to your library, or you could pull up the community contributed content, and that's all customized content from there. So that's kind of a really quick overview into seeing content for Schoology. Schoology grades show up with the same score that they would. So this one, I don't think we've done content in this particular piece. But they would show up with the score report within Schoology. So it would give them the grade either complete or incomplete, so whatever you set your score for, or the percentage correct for practice or a quiz within there. And that's kind of what you get within Schoology based on their platform. If you did the same thing in Canvas, you could actually open up the whole report and see all of that detailed information as well. And then kind of along those same lines, if you were using Google Classroom, so let me click over to Classroom for a second. If I had assigned this content to Classroom instead, I could see how my students were doing. I could go in here and I could look at a particular practice and say, oh, no one's done this practice so far. So let's find one where people have actually done some of this. And you'll see this particular person did it. And you can kind of see the same level. So that's a complete, incomplete. Here's an example quiz. I think this one has practice. So here I could actually go into the particular topic, and that student, if I just click on there, it opens up the whole score report in Classroom as well. So you have options kind of using those three major systems to actually see content and the scores within there. For Google Classroom, you would assign it just like you would from CK12. For Canvas, so for Canvas from here, and for Schoology as well, you're assigning and pulling content from within that platform and then seeing the scores within there. So those are a little bit different, and we do learning management system reviews of that, and we'll do little sessions specifically on each type of learning management system this summer as well. So if you have more questions on those, let us know. I can stay on at the end as well and go through it a little more, but hopefully that gives you a basic understanding.
Great. With that being said, Katie, as Katie mentioned, please feel free to keep putting questions in the Q&A window. But I think with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen back. And we're just going to go ahead and start some of the kind of wrap-up process to announce new things that are coming up and things we want you to be aware of. Just as a reminder that Katie mentioned our tools and apps page, which you can access from the footer of the CK12 website. That includes information and links to not only the practice app, but also our Flexbook and Simulations app, which allow for offline use. As we've been talking about, CK12 does have LMS integration. If you go further down on the bottom of any web page, you'll see there are various learning management systems that CK12 partner with, including Canvas, Edmodo, Google Classroom, and Schoology. So as we said throughout the presentation, adaptive practice and classes are just two of the things we offer at CK12 Foundation. If you'd like to see a bit of an overview of all of our resources, a good place to go is ck12.org/overview. And you'll see additional information as well as overview videos talking about things like our Flexbooks, concept-based learning, adaptive practice, and any of the other CK12 resources. A great way to continue the conversation, network with other CK12 users, and get support from our staff is to join a CK12 Cafe. From our homepage, you can click on Cafe to see our various forums for both students and educators. I'd recommend in specific that you join the Jumpstart for Educators Cafe and keep checking back as we keep adding state-specific forums for you to network. We hope that you've enjoyed today's demonstrations and that some of the short videos of real users in your classroom have engaged you and inspired you. Please keep an eye out for upcoming webinars on additional topics that might be of interest to you. Later on in April, we're going to be offering CK12 for math and science teachers to teach about some of our new resources that are being offered. In May 9th, we'll be offering a session on customizing adaptive practice and assignments, which is essentially a continuation of this webinar where we'll go into more advanced things like how to create multi-part assignments, create quizzes. And then on May 22nd, we'll be doing a great overview of everything CK12. So if you liked what you saw today, but you want to learn a little bit more about things like our Flexbooks or other great tools, the Everything CK12 could be a really good place for you to go ahead and look. And if you're particularly interested in learning even more about CK12, then a great option could be doing CK12 Certified Educator Program. This July, we'll once again be holding a series of free webinars for educators. If you want to learn more and sign up, go to ck12.org/certified. And if, in particular, if you're interested in getting a jump start towards your certification, you can go ahead and email jumpstart@ck12.org, and we can share the assignment and additional information you may need in order to get started on that. Something that really helps us to improve our practice is to get feedback from our users. So we'll be attaching this particular URL in the chat right now. But if you can go ahead and go to this URL and give us feedback, it really helps us just to continue to improve what we're doing to make sure we're providing the best possible experience we can in the 1-hour webinar that we like to give for all of our great teachers and community of educators. And the last thing I just want to say is just thank you so much for joining us today. Let me assure you that we will continue to be supported by our team here at CK12, and we're always happy to help you in any way possible. Just send us an email anytime to support@ck12.org. And don't forget to let your social networks know about CK12 and your participation in our webinars. We're on all of the socials as CK12 Foundation, or you can even hashtag CK12. So with that being said, that's it for today's core programming. But as we promised, we'll stay on and we'll answer any particular questions that you guys might have that we didn't cover during the course of the particular webinar today.
Thanks, Ryan. It looks like we have one more question that just came in, and I realized that we didn't get back to a particular question about kind of sorting assignments. I'm going to start with that, and then we'll go into Q&A. So as we said, if you have all your questions answered, you are more than welcome to sign off. If you're looking for the assignment that goes with this towards certification, email Jumpstart. And if you have questions or you want to hear what we have to say, feel free to stay on until we are out of questions. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and kind of jump back into here for a second. So the question that came in at the very beginning was kind of an option for sorting our assignments. At this point in time, really, there's no way to kind of filter or put them in folders. They do put the later ones there, but you can sort by due date, you can sort by least recent due date, alphabetical, whether you've assigned it in general or whether you've assigned it to this class. These are the ones I haven't assigned, these are the ones I've assigned to this class, and then it kind of goes from that point forward. So right now the options are to sort. We have had the request to kind of filter and archive previous assignments, and so I always encourage users, if there's something that they're looking to be able to do, to continue to email us, because the more times we get that request, the higher priority that is for us to work on. We're a small nonprofit, and so our team has to kind of prioritize accordingly. So feel free to email us if you have those requests. We had another question that came in, and this one has to do with Schoology, so I'm just going to switch back to here for a second. The question, this is actually probably relevant across the board. So let me show you this even from CK12. So the question is, if I assign a particular read, so let's say I go into bio and I assign cell theory, for example. So if I open this read, there's read and a practice. So if I assign this read to my class within CK12, or if I do the same thing within Schoology or Google Classroom or anywhere else, I'm assigning the read itself. And that means that I'm going to see the report on whether a student accessed that read. If I also assign practice, so I can do that from this bright orange practice button within CK12, or by searching and assigning the practice within Schoology and Canvas, then I've now assigned both parts to students. As long as I've assigned both parts, it doesn't matter if they access it through the practice option, because they'll just see practice instead of preview here, or they access it directly from assignments. However they access it, that's not as big a deal. If they're working within Schoology or they're working within CK12, that data will transfer. It's a question of making sure that you've assigned all the different parts that you want access to the reports for. So hopefully that answered your question. If you guys have any other ones, feel free to add them in here. We'll stay on for another minute or two just to make sure that if you're typing one in, it gets answered. And otherwise, we thank you for joining us. And one note, I know Star posted a bunch of super helpful links within the chat window. Feel free to copy those. The CK12 webinar 17 or 18, both will work. We've just now switched into 2018, but it's still the same feedback form. So feel free to check that out. So it looks like we're not getting any more questions at this time. Feel free to email support@ck12.org if you have any other questions, or join us for an upcoming webinar. And with that, I think we will sign out today. Have a great day.